So now one ride in half an hour just earned me $35. Are you following me? Okay, and I know this sounds crazy. I know it's a stretch from what we're supposed to be talking about, but this is important that I, again, continue to give back. And I forgot to mention, make sure that the inside of your car is spotless. And there's ways to do this without going to the car wash every 3 days. Okay, make sure the inside is spotless. Outside, there's not too much you can do because on any given day, you can be driving through several different temperature changes, or you might be driving along the coast and get the moisture, or you might live in an area where there's dew every morning. So that part is tough, and the best you can do with that is make sure your windows are clean as best you can. But customers don't too much care about the outside as long as it's not disgustingly dirty. They care about getting in the car and there's grass and debris and dirt and the seats aren't clean everywhere. I hate it. I went to New Orleans for the first time. I took a Lyft everywhere. First time I took Lyft. And every car I got into was absolutely dirty. Okay? The point I'm making is when a customer, anybody gets into a clean car, there's a feeling of comfort that comes over you. This also goes a long way into making sure you get tipped at the end of your ride so that you don't have to be out there all day. When I first started, I was making great money, $250 a day plus a day, working 6-7 days a week. We were making fantastic money. I don't have the chops for it anymore. You know, that's 12, 13, 14-hour days. I don't. I don't. But just to give you an idea. But yeah, you won't have to spend all that time out there all day long. Okay? Keep your car clean. Recognize this is a customer service position and start learning and understanding people. They need to feel comfortable in your ride. Okay? A lot of times you'll hear Lyft and Uber drivers, mostly Uber drivers from my experience, complaining, we don't make any money. We don't make any money. Let me tell you why they're saying that. These are people who are many times working part-time. So if you're trying to make an extra 50, 60 bucks, that's great. But in order to make money, you got to get behind that wheel. You got to do it safely. And you got to be out there for an 8-hour shift. Treat it as a job. But the other part of this is this. These are people who are constantly canceling rides. And of course, everything has an algorithm. And if they see you doing this, they're going to give you those $2, $3 rides more than they would give you the 10, 15, 20, 30 plus dollar rides. That makes a huge difference in the day. You know, if you're I try to keep my acceptance rate. That means the calls that come in that you accept and take on as opposed to canceling. I try to keep my acceptance rate 95 to 100%. There are going to be some times where you have to cancel for many different reasons. If we have time, we'll get into that later. But this is huge. If Lyft knows they can count on you to take all the rides, what they're going to do, even when they give you some of the $2 or $3 rides, they'll give you a couple of those, and they're going to give you a ride that's going to take you way out to another area where demand is working. That's really how it works. So it's imperative that you don't cancel rides that you don't have to. And if you have a fear of this, which is normal because I did when I first started, I was paranoid about it. I don't know these people behind me, so on and so forth. Let me tell you something. 99.999% of your rides will be event-free. There will be no issues. When you hear all those stories about all these crazy things happening, it's because these are people who are driving at night. They're picking up people out of bars and clubs and all these crazy things. No, sir. No, ma'am. I've tried driving at night. Once I realized that, I stopped doing it. I don't drive all night long anymore because you pick up, after the first couple of times, you realize you're picking up people doing weird things. That's when you get those type of stories. To date, I do not have any crazy stories to tell you about some drunk dude or some drunk chick or somebody throwing up in the car. Stuff's never happened to me because I don't drive at night. Save yourself some time and don't do that. If you have to, you have to. I get it. I understand. But for the most part, get up early, 5, 6 o'clock. That's what I do. Get up early and knock out your day. Treat it as an 8-hour job. If you have the stability to do more, do it. If not, make sure when you get tired, you pull over or you go home and go to sleep. But start early because you're going to get people who are, have long ways to go to work and they're trying to get ahead of the traffic, especially if you live in California. 20 miles, 15, 20 miles. So out the gate in your first couple of hours, and I forgot to say, make sure you have a goal of what you want to make for the day. When I first started, I didn't know what to expect, but I was making, $250 every day. Now I brought that down. It's around about 200, 150, 7 days a week. That's still over $1,000 a week. So figure out what your goal is, what you can do if you have kids, all that good stuff. You figure that out. So get up early, eat a nice solid breakfast. Make sure you stay hydrated throughout the day, but start early. Get those rides, people going long ways to their jobs. Also, their airport, people going back and forth to airports, especially before all this stuff started happening. Airports are great sources of income, great sources of income. And you usually catch these people coming out of hotels or other events, or just somebody random, your next door neighbor. That's happened to be the neighbor in my building that I'd never seen before, off to the airport, $30, $35 off the top. So figuring out where to be and when to be there are also key, but it just, that stuff that comes. It took me a few months to figure it out, the stuff I'm telling you now. But before all these lockdowns and things, what I would do is I would start off, as soon as I get in the car, turn the app on and let it take me wherever it's going to take me. And you'll find that it'll take you to all the same spots at some point throughout the day. In many cases, bring you back home or pretty close to being back home. And so what I would do is, if I find myself in, whatever city, and I'm, giving a ride to another city that I'm not familiar with, I just go down to the airport. Now, I don't recommend, many people do it, I don't recommend sitting in airports all day, because you'll probably get one ride every hour, every 2 hours, and you'll mess around and have maybe $100 for the day, because there's a lot of time being wasted. Yeah, you're saving gas, but you're not making any money, so it doesn't really matter. You have to get out on the road and do that. But it's a great strategy if when things pick up, to bounce between the airports, pick up the little rides in between. If you're in an unfamiliar area, sit at the airport and bounce around till you get back to a place that you're familiar with. It's different for obviously every city, every state, but where I am, it's dependable. It's absolutely dependable. And I do every 3 or 4 rides, sometimes 2 to 3. I'll get out while I'm waiting for the next person to get in and stretch my legs. I'll dust off I have 2 plastic liners in the back seats on the floor so it doesn't dirty your rugs. And I'll just shake them out, dust them out, wipe them off real quick with a towel that I keep. That way your car stays spotless, absolutely spotless. Another tip, this is something I was doing before all this stuff started happening, but I always kept the windows cracked depending on the temperature, to always have fresh air coming inside. Always, always, always. And communicate that with your customer. Like right now, the mornings are pretty cold for most people, so I'll turn the heat on and keep the windows cracked a little bit and explain to them what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And you will find 9 times out of 10, just like with any good customer service representative, if you start explaining to them your reasons, rationale for doing things for their comfort, you will not have a problem out of them. I promise you, you will not. So I know we have this added thing with the virus going around, but this is a great way to kind of offset that. Some people, go to the extremes and put plastic dividers up and all that kinds of stuff, and that works too. But keeping the windows down, fresh air in is just as good as well. And you should also note, a lot of great things come from sitting behind this wheel, especially when you're picking up people from airports. You can find them anywhere, but especially from airports. You'll find that you'll have someone in the car that low-key might be somebody, but you just don't know who they are. And you have a chance to converse with people that you would never, ever be able to call their office and say, yeah, I like 15 minutes with council member so-and-so. I had a guy who was I won't say his name, but he was, let's just say he was a mover and shaker in D.C. And I always wonder, what is this? Why doesn't he order, like a Uber Black or, some people just don't mind. But anyway, as he got to talking and explaining who he was, I was like, oh my God, for real? This people you would never, ever meet. And then when you're talking to these people, for those who are willing, because not all of them will talk, not all of them are interested in helping the average person, but some of them are. Many of them are, and they'll give you things to look at. You start learning about worldwide affairs and finance and, being a Jehovah's Witness, I didn't go to college. I've got my college education sitting in the front seat and driving that vehicle. So a lot of good things can come from it. I actually had a call from, because sometimes when you're driving, you'll get a call while you're still in the current one, and you get to see if there's a picture attached who it is. And that next call was Andre Harrell. For many of you, you may know who he is. He just passed away recently, but he's a music producer. He's in that field, multi-million-dollar dude, probably close to $1 billion. And he was next up. But for whatever reason, the person I had in the car, she had all these different tasks she was trying to do, or the drop off was really tough to get to, and so I had to do some maneuvering on Sunset. And anyway, so I ended up missing him. But the point I'm making is, it is likely that you will have some movers and shakers in your car. That's why it's imperative for you to be a professional and understand the role of customer service. And even if you have other things on the side, if you are a real estate agent, if you are whatever you are, this is a great way to meet people, because the traditional way of knocking on doors and cold calling, people are adverse to that. That's not working anymore. So this is a great way to say, hey, if you can steer the conversation, make sure it's organic, okay? Don't let somebody get in and, hey, I'm a real estate agent, here's my card, or I'm a lawyer, no. Let the conversation develop, and if it doesn't, don't push it. You just wait for the next one. As many people think customer service is about talking and forcing their way in the conversation. Absolutely not. Most of it is listening. And if you're good, I've done it. A couple of times I've done it, been able to move the conversation slowly over, and it works. And you're building a rapport with people, especially when you have the longer trips from the airports or wherever you're going. You're building a rapport with a person, and if you're really good, you can do that within that, that half an hour to an hour trip. And, you can either get future business with them. You can find yourself a job. I've been offered jobs. I just didn't want them. I had a lady, I was dropping her off on a coastal area. And after talking to her about my supply chain background, she says, hey, let me have your email. And I want to send you, what we do and see if you would be interested. So there's a ton of great opportunities that come from doing this if you handle your business appropriately. And so let's move on. I want to give you some of the things you should look out for, and in terms of the cons of this, right? And I'm going through it quickly, and there's a lot to cover, but I'm only have a limited amount of time. One of the things you need to do when people get in the car is first ask them for their name and the address to where they're going. Verify who they are. Many times they will want you to tell them, and many times you'll find that these are people who never even call the Lyft. They're just trying to get in the car and go somewhere. And then in the middle of that, they'll say, hey, that's not the right address. Can you take me here, right? It happens, but it's not a big deal. Most of that, if you ask up front for them to verify who they are and where they're headed, that'll take care of that. The other thing is, sometimes, and this is a two-way street, sometimes people will get in the car, and once they've verified everything, you'll take off. And in the middle of the ride, they will change the address on you. Now, for each driver is different. I don't do it because many times what they're trying to do is save. When I say change the address, I mean either change it to a different location that's further out, or they'll add a second stop because it's cheaper for them to do that. Okay, which means you are working at a discount. So some drivers will do it, just depending on the whole scene and what's happening in the car and the discussions you guys are having. But many times it's to save money, which means you're working at a discount, right, of sorts. I'll let you decide how you want to handle that. I think ultimately it works well both ways. If you do decide to do it, many times, if it's a legitimate request they're doing, they'll tip you. And sometimes they won't. And sometimes it won't be a legitimate request. They're just trying to save a few dollars. Because if you pull up your app now and you put in a ride and there are two stops, you'll see a slightly higher charge as opposed to just one stop. Okay, especially, when you start thinking about the time of day, whether it's rush hour, so on and so forth. So those are just a couple of things to look out for. And outside of that, there's really not a whole lot of things that could potentially make it unpleasant. Every now and then you may have someone who, especially, if you're black or Mexican, you'll pick up in some areas, and those people, those on the racist side, they're looking for an opportunity in conversation to be subtly racist. I want you to remember something. It's still your car. If you decide to use your own, we'll talk about renting one of their cars later. But it's still your car, and you are still the driver. You are the owner, and you deserve to be respected in your